Welcome to the Sleep Paralysis tapes. Settle into the dark, pull the covers close, and let the heavy silence fill your room. Tonight, we descend into chilling tales of the unexplained. Before the screen fades to pitch black, I invite you to become part of this archive. If you have your own terrifying encounters, please contact me and I will narrate your story in a future tape. If these shadows bring you comfort, please like, subscribe, and tap the bell. Now, close your eyes. Do not look at the foot of your bed. Just listen and let us begin. It was October, and the wind off the lake had a new kind of cold in it, the kind that finds every gap in your coat. Anya didn't mind. She was 24, a paralegal with her first real salary, and the keys to her own place were in her hand. They were cold, too. The building was on Beacon Street in Uptown, one of those old Chicago courtyard buildings from the 1920s. The super, a man named Leo with tired eyes, led her up 4 flights. The stairs groaned under their weight. He unlocked the door to apartment 4B, handed her the keys, and left with a nod. Just another tenant. Just another move-in day. Anya stepped inside. The first thing she noticed was the smell. Not old building smell, but the sharp, clean scent of new paint. The studio was small. The floors were of finished hardwood gleaming under the bare bulb. It was perfect. It was hers. The moving was the usual chaos. Boxes labeled kitchen, books, don't crush. She worked through the afternoon. By evening, the worst was over. She was unpacking the kitchen, putting her mismatched plates into a drawer that stuck a little. She yanked it, and it came free with a shudder. That's when she saw it, wedged in the gap behind the drawer, against the back wall of the cabinet. A small rectangle of white. She reached in and pulled it out. It was a piece of cardstock, laminated. The edges were slightly worn. Someone had taken care with this. She held it under the kitchen light. The typing was in a plain, sensible font. A list. The header read simply, "For apartment 4B." And then, the rules. 1. Never answer the intercom after 11 p.m. No matter how long it buzzes, it is not for you. 2. If you hear 3 distinct knocks on the window at night, do not look toward them. Turn on the small lamp by your bed immediately and keep it on until sunrise. 3. The hallway closet door must always be locked. The key is on the ring the super gave you. Check the lock every morning. 4. If you wake up and the closet door is open, do not approach it. Leave the apartment immediately and do not return before noon. 5. Do not, under any circumstances, acknowledge the reflection in the window between 2 and 2:15 a.m. Pull the blinds. Anya read it twice. A slow smile spread across her face. She actually laughed, a short, dismissive puff of air. Prank. Obviously. The last tenant had left this behind to spook the next person. It was so specific, so earnest. She almost threw it in the trash. But something stopped her. The laminate felt official. The rules had a weird, practiced rhythm. They didn't read like a joke. They read like instructions. A manual for living here. That thought was more ridiculous than the rules themselves. This was her fresh start. She wasn't going to let some anonymous weirdo's fantasy spoil it. Nice try, she said to the empty apartment. Her voice sounded good in the space. She slid the laminated card back into the narrow gap behind the kitchen drawer. She'd let it stay hidden. A story to tell friends over wine. You'll never believe what I found in my apartment. She finished unpacking. She ordered Thai food. She sat on the floor and ate, looking out at the lights of the city. The window was a black mirror now. Her own reflection, tired and happy, looked back. She didn't think about the rules. Not really. But you need to understand something about apartments like this. They get painted. They get new floors. The old smells are covered over. But the space remains. The walls, remember, the quiet, when it settles in after a move, isn't empty. It's waiting. Anya went to bed that first night feeling the good ache of a long day's work. She slept deeply, in that way you only can in a new place. She didn't hear a thing. Not again. The week that followed was exactly what Anya had hoped for, a quiet, simple rhythm. She'd go to work at the law firm, pushing through documents and proofreading contracts. She'd come home, cook a simple meal, watch something on her laptop. The studio was her sanctuary. The new paint smell faded, replaced by the scent of her coffee and her shampoo. The laminated card behind the drawer was forgotten. A silly story she hadn't even bothered to tell anyone. That's how these things work. The mundane is a powerful eraser. It convinces you the strange was never really there at all. It was a Thursday night, just past 11:30. Anya was already in bed, scrolling through her phone. A small lamp on the floor cast a warm circle of light. The city outside was a distant, gentle hum. Then the intercom buzzed. Not a polite tap, a long, insistent, jarring drone that shattered the quiet. The sound was aggressively physical. It vibrated in her teeth. She sighed, annoyed. A wrong apartment. A drunk friend. It happened. She threw the covers back, her bare feet hitting the cool floor. The buzz continued, unwavering. All right, she muttered, padding to the door. The plastic button for the intercom glowed with a faint, sickly green light. She reached out, her index finger poised to press it and ask who was there. Her hand stopped an inch from the button. A sentence floated up from the back of her mind. Rule 1. Never answer the intercom after 11 p.m., no matter how long it buzzes. It is not for you. She actually rolled her eyes at herself, standing in her own apartment, frozen by a stupid piece of laminated cardstock. This was ridiculous. She was being ridiculous. The buzzing drilled into her skull. Her finger hovered. The green light seemed to pulse. It is not for you. A different feeling, cold and slick, began to seep into the annoyance. It wasn't fear, not yet. It was a sudden, vivid awareness of her own isolation. 4th floor. Old building. Late at night. Whoever was down there buzzing with that relentless, patient pressure, they couldn't see her. They had no idea if she was home. But they buzzed anyway. As if they knew. She pulled her hand back as if the button had grown hot. The buzzing stopped. Just like that. The silence that followed was absolute and somehow heavier than before. It wasn't the peaceful quiet of a minute ago. It was a listening silence. Anya stood completely still, her heart thumping a dull rhythm against her ribs. She waited for it to start again. It didn't. She let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Relief washed over her, followed immediately by a flush of hot shame. See? Nothing. A wrong number. They'd given up. She just stood there like a scared child, governed by a prank. She went back to bed, turned off the light, and lay in the dark. She listened to the normal sounds of the building. A pipe clanked. A door shut down the hall. She told herself she felt foolish. She didn't feel foolish. She felt like she'd passed a test she hadn't agreed to take. The next night, she was on edge. She tried to read a novel, but the words swam on the page. Every tiny noise from the hallway made her glance up. She kept looking at the intercom, that little green eye by the door. By midnight, she was tired of her own jumpiness. She decided to go to sleep, to reset, to prove to herself that everything was fine. She was in that hazy, drifting place just before sleep, the book sagging against her chest. Then she heard it. 3 knocks. Not on the door. Not from the hallway. They came from the window. The large, 4th floor window at the far end of her studio. Tap, tap, tap. 3 distinct, solid, deliberate impacts against the glass. The sound was impossibly clear and utterly impossible. They weren't random taps from a tree branch. There was no tree that high. They weren't the clicks of settling building materials. They were knocks. Someone asking to be let in. Anya's eyes flew open, every muscle in her body locked. Her breath vanished. She didn't move. She just stared into the dark toward the window, her mind a white panic. Rule number 2 flashed in her mind, not as words, but as a command. Do not look toward them. But how could she not? The sound was right there. It had come from her window. Her logic, screaming in a tiny, rational voice, said it had to be something else. A bird. A piece of loose siding. It had to be. Tap, tap, tap. They came again. The same rhythm, the same solid wooden weight to the sound. A little harder this time. Not frantic, patient. Her head began to turn on its pillow, a slow, involuntary creep toward the window. She had to see. She had to know what was making that sound. Her eyes strained against the dark. Turn on the small lamp by your bed immediately. The rule was a lifeline. She didn't think. She fumbled her hand off the mattress, gripping wildly on the floor beside her. Her fingers brushed the cord of the lamp. She called for the switch, found it, and turned it. A soft, yellow glow flooded the space around her bed. It didn't reach the window. It created a pool of safety. Beyond its edge, the room became a cave of deeper, more profound shadows. She lay there, clutching the covers, her heart hammering. She stared at the lamp as if it were the only real thing in the world. She didn't look toward the window. She didn't dare. She waited for the knocks to come again. They didn't. She stayed like that, rigid, for an hour. Then, too, the lamp burned on. She never heard the sound again. Eventually, a gray, sickly dawn began to seep around the blinds. Only then, her body aching with tension, did she risk a glance. The window was just a window. The blinds were closed. Outside, the city was waking up. A normal Friday morning. Anya got up. Her movements were slow, mechanical. She made coffee. She didn't taste it. The relief she'd expected, the return of normalcy, didn't come. Something had shifted. The apartment no longer felt like a sanctuary. It felt like a space she was sharing. And the rules were no longer a joke. They were a warning. And she was now terribly a believer. You see, the first violation is always a mistake, an accident. The second is a choice. Anya chose to turn on the lamp. She chose to follow the rule. And in doing so, she made the rules real. She gave them power. Once you do that, there's no going back. You're in the story, and the story always continues. The next day was a blank space. Anya went through the motions at work, but her mind was in that apartment, listening for knocks that never came in the daylight. The fear was still there, a cold stone in her stomach. But something else had taken root alongside it. A terrible, itching curiosity. She could no longer pretend the rules were a joke. They were a response. A specific, tested response to specific, recurring events. The buzzing had stopped when she didn't answer. The knocks had stopped when she turned on the lamp. That was the logic of it, and the logic was terrifying. It meant the rules worked. It meant they were necessary. Her eyes kept drifting to the hallway closet. It was an unremarkable door, painted the same off-white as the walls. It had a simple, old-fashioned slide bolt lock made of tarnished brass, positioned about halfway up. The bolt was currently shut tight. She hadn't thought about it since moving in. It was just a closet. Rule 3 said the hallway closet door must always be locked. The key is on the ring the super gave you. Check the lock every morning. Rule 4 said if you wake up and the closet door is open, do not approach it. Leave the apartment immediately and do not return before noon. She had checked the lock that morning. Her fingers had trembled as she pushed against the bolt, confirming it was shut. It was. Now, home from work, standing in the silent studio, the curiosity burned. It was a stupid, reckless feeling. It felt like poking a sleeping animal with a stick, just to see if it was really alive. The rational part of her, the paralegal who dealt in facts and evidence, screamed at her to leave it alone. To follow the rules, make her coffee, live her life. The rules were a fence. Why would you ever want to see what was on the other side of a fence like that? But the other part, the part that had lain frozen in bed listening to impossible knocks, needed to know. What was in there? What could possibly require a lock and a rule about not even approaching it if it was open? Was it structural? A hole in the floor, a broken pipe? That made sense. That was logical. Old buildings have problems. Maybe the previous tenant was just intensely cautious, a weirdo with a flair for the dramatic. That thought almost convinced her. Almost. She walked over to the closet door. She stood before it, listening. The building was quiet. No hum from the pipes, no footsteps above. Just the faint, distant sigh of traffic on Beacon Street. She reached out a hand, stopping just before her fingertips touched the painted wood. She didn't know what she expected to feel. Coldness. Vibration. Some sign. There was nothing. It was just a door. "It's empty," she whispered to herself. Her voice was too loud in the hush. "It's just a closet. I'll look, see it's empty, and that will be that. I'll lock it and never think about it again." The reasoning was flimsy, but it was enough. The curiosity had won. It always does, at this point in the story. The need to demystify the horror, to shine a light on the monster and see it's just a pile of coats. It's a powerful, fatal impulse. Her hand dropped to the brass bolt. It was cool under her fingers. She took a slow, shaky breath, and then she slid it open. The sound was a dry, metallic snick that echoed in the hallway. The bolt was now disengaged. The door was unlocked. Nothing happened. No gust of foul air. No distant sound from within. No sudden drop in temperature. The apartment felt exactly the same. The relief was immediate and dizzying. She almost laughed. Of course! Of course it was nothing, just an empty closet in an old building. The previous tenant was just a weirdo. She felt a wave of exhaustion, the release of days of coiled tension. She was an idiot. A scared, superstitious idiot. No, a reasonable person would have relocked the door right then. They would have taken their little victory of normality and reinforced the fence. But Anya, she had to be sure. She had to see the emptiness with her own eyes, to scrub the imagined horrors from her mind with the bland, boring truth. Her hand found the small, recessed handle. She pulled. The door swung inward smoothly, without a sound. The closet was shallow, maybe 2 feet deep, and it was not empty. There were no coats, no broken pipes, no gaping hole in the floor. The back wall of the closet and the floor were covered in a thick, gray layer of undisturbed dust. It was a perfect blank canvas of neglect, except it wasn't perfect. In the center of the dusty floor, clear as a photograph, was a single, small handprint. It was too small to be an adult's. A child's, maybe. 4 fingers and a faint, smudged palm. It was pressed into the dust as if someone had knelt down, braced themselves, and leaned in. And leading away from the handprint, toward the threshold where Anya now stood frozen, was a single, clear footprint. Small, like the handprint. Bare. And it was dark, not with dust, but with what looked like dried, reddish-brown mud. The footprint stopped just an inch from the closet's edge, as if whatever made it had reached the limit of its domain and stopped. Anya didn't scream. She didn't move. The air left her lungs in a silent, helpless rush. Her mind tried to process it, to find a reason. A workman's child, a prank from before the painting. But the dust was undisturbed everywhere else. The handprint was isolated, deliberate. And the mud, it hadn't rained in days. Rule 4 echoed in her skull, not as text but as a primal scream. Do not approach it. She was approaching it. She was staring right at it. With a jolt of pure animal panic, she slammed the door shut. The sound was a gunshot in the quiet. Her fingers fumbled, slick with sweat, as she fought to slide the bolt back into its housing. It caught. She shoved it home, hard. Then she stumbled backward, away from the door until her back hit the opposite wall of the narrow hallway. She slid down it to the floor, knees pulled to her chest, and stared at the locked door. She had checked the lock that morning. It had been fastened. The dust inside had been perfectly undisturbed. So how did the handprint get there? And more importantly, if the thing that made the print was inside the locked closet, where was it now? Anya didn't move from the hallway floor for a long time. She just sat with her back against the wall, staring at the locked closet door. The image of the handprint was burned onto the back of her eyelids. Every time she blinked, she saw it. It was small, deliberate. A reasonable person would have called someone then. A friend. The super. The police, even. But what would she say? I found a dusty handprint in my closet. It was proof of nothing. It was just dust. And that was the problem. The evidence was maddeningly physical, yet it explained nothing. It was a fact without a story. Her paralegal mind, trained to build cases from fragments, scrabbled for a logical sequence. A workman's kid. A previous tenant's child. But the dust everywhere else was smooth and untouched. The print was an island, and the muddy footprint looked recent. It looked wet. Slowly, stiffly, she pushed herself up. Her legs were numb. She walked back to the closet door, her steps quiet on the hardwood. She didn't touch it. She just stood there, listening. The silence in the apartment had a new quality. It felt like the silence of a held breath. She needed a record, proof for herself if nothing else. Her phone was on the kitchen counter. She fetched it, her hands cold. She opened the camera app. She approached the door again. This time, she slid the bolt open with slow, careful pressure. The sound was softer now. She took a deep breath, held it, and pulled the door open. The closet was exactly as she'd left it. The handprint, the footprint, the blank gray dust. She raised her phone. The screen's light washed over the interior, making the dust look like ash. She zoomed in on the handprint and took a photo. The click of the digital shutter was obscenely loud. She moved the light to the muddy footprint on the threshold and took another. The mud in the flash looked black and thick. She stared at the images on her screen. They were clear, undeniable. In the cold, conical frame of the camera, they looked even worse, more real. She quickly closed the door. She slammed the bolt home, then checked it again and again. Her heart was a frantic bird in a cage of ribs. The rest of the evening was a blur of forced normalcy. She made dinner but couldn't eat. She turned on the TV but didn't hear it. Her eyes kept drifting to the hallway, to that off-white door. She found herself checking the lock every 15 minutes. Walking past it to go to the bathroom, she'd give it a wide berth. You have to understand, finding the thing is never the worst part. The worst part is the waiting afterward, the knowing that you've touched something you shouldn't have, that you've been noticed. The rules were a barrier, and she hadn't just peeked over it. She'd taken a photograph. That night, she went to bed with every light in the apartment on. The apartment was a bright, blazing island in the dark lake of the city. She felt exposed, but the alternative darkness was unthinkable. Sleep, when it finally came, was thin and fitful. It wasn't rest. It was just an absence of being awake. And then she was dreaming. A bad one. The kind that doesn't have a plot, just a feeling. A sensation of being small and cold and standing in deep, clinging mud. She was trying to pull her feet free, but the mud was like hands holding her ankles. And from somewhere in the dark, a slow, scraping sound. Like something dragging its stuff through dirt. She woke up. It wasn't a gentle awakening. It was a sudden, total return to consciousness. 1 second she was in the dream mud. The next she was staring at her own ceiling, her body rigid. The apartment was dark. All the lights were out. Panic, cold and pure, flooded her veins. She hadn't turned them off. She wouldn't have. She lay perfectly still, listening. The familiar hum of the refrigerator was gone. The soft glow of the power strip under her desk was absent. A power outage. It had to be. But then she saw the faint silver lines around her blinds. The city light. The streetlights were still on. The building across the way had windows lit. The outage was just here. Just in her apartment. Her breath started coming in short, sharp hitches. She forced herself to turn her head just an inch on the pillow. The small lamp by her bed was unplugged. The cord lay coiled on the floor like a dead snake. Someone had been in the room. The thought was ice in her chest. She had to move. She had to get out. Rule 4 screamed in her memory. If you wake up and the closet door is open, slowly, with an effort that felt Herculean, she turned her head toward the hallway. The bedroom door was open. From her angle on the bed, she could see a slice of the hallway wall. And the closet door. It was wide open. The darkness inside it was absolute, a perfect rectangle of nothing. Anya stopped breathing. Her eyes strained, trying to pierce that black square. Was there movement? A shape? Or was it just the pounding of her own heart making the shadows pulse? She had to leave. The rule was clear. Don't approach it. Leave. But to leave, she had to get out of bed. She had to walk past the open doorway. She had to cross its line of sight. She gathered the blankets around her, a pathetic shield. She slid one leg out from under the covers. The air was bitterly cold. Her foot touched the floor. That's when she saw it. On the hardwood floor of the hallway, just outside the threshold of the open closet, was a single footprint. Small, the size of the handprint. But this one wasn't in dust. It was wet, fresh, dark, loamy mud glistening in the faint city light. It was pointed out of the closet, as if something had taken a single step out and then stopped. It was facing her bed. Anya made a sound then, a tiny, choked whimper that died in her throat. She shoved herself backward against the headboard, pulling her legs fully onto the bed, away from the floor, away from the footprint. She stared at that dark, wet mark on the pale wood. It was the most horrifying thing she had ever seen. It was an announcement, a visitation. The closet door was open, and something had come out. She didn't sleep again that night. She sat upright against the headboard, the blankets pulled to her chin, her eyes fixed on the hallway. The open door. The footprint. The lights did not come back on. Just before dawn, as the first gray light began to dilute the blackness, she saw the footprint begin to dry. The shiny wetness faded to a dull, cracked brown. But the shape remained, a stain. And as the room lightened from pitch to charcoal, she saw something else. The closet door was no longer a rectangle of pure black. She could see the back wall now. The dusty floor. The handprint was still there. But now, beside it in the dust, was a second matching handprint. And leading from them toward the threshold was a second set of small, muddy footprints. The month that followed was a kind of living death. Anya didn't sleep, not really. She'd doze in fits and starts on her friend's couch or in the harsh break room at work. Her own apartment was no longer a home. It was a crime scene, where the crime was ongoing and invisible and directed entirely at her. She followed the rules with a fanatic's precision. The intercom buzzed twice more, always just after 11. She never answered. The knocks came on 3 separate nights. She'd fumble for the lamp, her eyes squeezed shut, and lie there until dawn. She checked the closet lock a dozen times a day. The bolt was always fastened. But every morning, she would find a new, dried, muddy footprint somewhere. Just one! In the middle of the kitchen floor, by the front door, once, right beside her bed. She stopped cleaning them up. What was the point? The silence in the apartment was no longer empty. It was a held breath, a presence. She felt it watching her from the hallway closet, even when the door was locked. She felt it in the cold spot that never seemed to warm up. She'd be pouring a glass of water and her skin would prickle. The simple, animal part of her brain screamed that she was not alone. Her work suffered. Her friends grew worried, then distant. She was a ghost in her own life. The photos on her phone felt like evidence of a madness only she could see. Finally, on a bleak Tuesday in early December, she broke. She went down to the superintendent's basement office. Leo was at his cluttered desk. She didn't try to explain. She just said she was breaking her lease, effective immediately, citing mental distress. She'd forfeit the deposit. She just needed out. Leo didn't look surprised. He just sighed and pulled a form from a drawer. As he filled it out, he spoke without looking up. "Second time this year," he muttered, more to the paperwork than to her. Anya froze. "What? For apartment 4B. Guy before you. Quiet fellow. Stayed 2 months. Came down here one morning, looked worse than you do. Said he had to go. Forfeited his deposit too." Leo finally glanced up. "Also said mental distress." The confirmation should have been a relief. It wasn't. It was a door slamming shut. This was a pattern, a cycle. The apartment was a machine, and she was just the latest piece fed into its gears. She moved out that weekend. She took only what she needed. The rest she left behind. A sacrifice to the space. The last thing she did was pull the laminated card from behind the kitchen drawer. She thought about leaving it for the next person. A warning. But she was too tired. She dropped it into a public trash can on the street 2 blocks away and didn't look back. Her new apartment was in Logan Square. It was smaller, darker, and the rent was higher. She didn't care. The walls were silent. The closets were just closets. Slowly, over weeks, then months, the sharp edge of the fear began to dull. It became a bad memory. A story she told herself to feel strong for having survived. She slept through the nights. She stopped checking locks. The photos were buried in a hidden folder on her phone. She almost convinced herself it was over. That's the cruelest trick these stories play. They let you think you've escaped. They let you rebuild your life on the assumption that the horror had a location, that it stays where you left it. It was March, a rainy afternoon. Anya was making tea in her quiet, safe kitchen. Her phone buzzed with an unknown Chicago number. She almost didn't answer, but habit, that old politeness, made her swipe to accept. "Hello?" There was a pause on the line. Then a voice, young, female, hesitant. "Hi, is this Anya?" "Yes. Who's this?" Another pause, a shaky breath. I'm sorry to bother you." "My name is Chloe. I just moved into an apartment on Beacon Street." "In Uptown?" Anya's hand tightened on the counter. The world grew very, very still. "Okay," Anya said, her voice strangely flat. "The super gave me your contact info. Said you were the previous tenant?" I had a question." Anya knew. She knew with a cold, sinking certainty. She saw it all. The move-in day. The new paint smell. The drawer that stuck. The voice on the phone continued, words tumbling out now, laced with a fear Anya recognized all too well. "I was unpacking the kitchen, and I found something. It's weird. It's a piece of laminated card stuck behind a drawer. It has this list on it. Rules. They're crazy. And I had to know." "Did you leave this here?" Anya closed her eyes. She saw the trash can on Beacon Street, the card falling into the dark. It was back in the drawer. It had always been in the drawer. It didn't matter that she'd thrown it away. The story didn't care. The story continues. It finds a way. She opened her mouth. She could lie. She could hang up and block the number and try to forget again. But she heard the tremor in Chloe's voice. The same lost, lonely terror she had felt. "Chloe!" Anya said, her own voice a dry whisper. "Listen to me." And on the other end of the line, in the newly painted silence of apartment 4B, Chloe listened. The tape has reached its end. I hope the stories tonight brought a pleasant chill to your spine as you drifted further into the dark. Thank you for braving the shadows here at the Sleep Paralysis tapes. If you are still awake, lying still in the quiet, remember to contact me with your own unsettling encounters so they can be added to our growing archive. As my voice fades away, let the silence of your room wrap around you completely. May your sleep be undisturbed, your doors remain locked, and your morning arrive safely. Until we open the tapes again, good night.